Welcome back to another deck tech video. Today we'll be covering another one of my favorite decks that I built, but before we do, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get into it. And today's deck's going to be the best god of our devastation. Of course, if you said Scarab God, well you're wrong. And it's not the Locust God either. Of course it's the Scorpion God. In all seriousness though, this deck started as me wanting to build the god that I didn't even know existed in our devastation because I feel like it kind of gets forgotten because his counterparts are so busted. The Scorpion God is a pretty interesting deck. The Scorpion God wants to put -1/-1 counters on creatures and kill them. Pretty straightforward, I think. The Scorpion God reads that whenever a creature with -1/-1 counter on it dies, draw a card. It also has an ability that allows you to put -1/-1 counters on creatures, but it's kind of expensive, and so really it's only going to be used as a last resort for the most part because you really shouldn't need it. Oh yeah, it also has this little text down here that says whenever it dies, it returns to your hand at the beginning of the next end step, which just allows you to avoid commander attacks, which is kind of nice. Anyway, so now that we've covered that we need -1/-1 counters, the first thing that popped into my head was Infect, of course, because, you know, Infect's just a lot of fun. And that's because Infect does damage in -1/-1 counters, and it also has poison counters, but we're not going to talk about that because it doesn't really matter for our purposes. And another keyword ability that we need is Wither. Wither is basically Infect minus the poison counters, so it's essentially what we need. So that being said, let's cover some of the creatures that you should be using that have these abilities. One is Plague Mirror and another is Necropede. Plague Mirror is a nice ramp piece that just happens to have Infect attached to it, which is really what you want because it's still doing what you want, it just has the Infect ability. And Necropede says whenever it goes to the graveyard from anywhere, you get to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. And it also has Infect, just as a bonus. So it does what you want and has the Infect ability. Perfect for this deck. Hate Flayer is an interesting card as well because it has Wither and an untap ability that says Hate Flayer deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. And well, this is a great way to get -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures because they can just not block and you still get to pay 3 mana and get those counters. Not to mention it can still block after. Moving on from Infect and Wither, you also have cards that just straight up say that you put -1/-1 counters on creatures. One of my favorites is Harbinger of Night. It just puts -1/-1 counters on each creature during your upkeep. So this is especially useful and crushes token decks. So just keep that in mind. Now, one of the nice things about this deck is that the Scorpion God is more of a utility piece and less of a necessity, which means that this deck can function without its commander. It's just your commander's icing on the cake. There are really 3 standout cards that I think I have to mention. The first is Blowfly Infestation. This card reads whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, if it had a -1/-1 counter on it, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. This basically allows you to generate a mass of -1/-1 counters and then continue to recycle them. And this is another token deck crusher because you kill a 1/1 with a -1/-1, you put that -1/-1 counter on another 1/1, and it just, like, you know, cycles until they're out of tokens, which is really nice. The next standout is Necroskitter. This just allows you to take any creature that dies with a -1/-1 counter, and this is just so useful because who doesn't like taking other people's creatures? And last but not least, we can't forget about Nest of Scarabs. This allows you to turn your counters into tokens, and while this is just a super good thing for you because it gives you creatures that are easy to kill with counters, and also maybe attackers depending on the situation. Now, to end it off, I just want to mention 2 of the cards that I think are really fun in this deck. One is Black Sun Zenith, and that is a board wipe that uses -1/-1 counters. And it's pretty sweet with Scorpion God because it draws you the cards, and it is different from Toxic Deluge. Be careful, because Toxic Deluge doesn't do counters, it just modifies toughness. And the last card that I want to mention is Everlasting Torment, which makes all damage act like it came from a source that has Wither. This means that any damage you deal will be dealt in -1/-1 counters, and that is phenomenal for this deck. And to top it all off, it just coincidentally prevents life gain, which can come in handy against a multitude of decks. So now I think you can see the way this deck goes. It kind of tries to control the board through removal and then build continual value till the end game. And this is really all you need to know to build yourself a Scorpion God deck. As always, the full deck list is in the description. However, I would prefer that you put your own spin on the deck with a couple different cards. It doesn't have to be a lot, just change 3 or 4 to give it your own character. If you found this video helpful, consider leaving a like, and if you want more deck techs or magic related content, subscribe. That's it, until we meet again, whether it's on this plane or another. Have a wonderful day.